Welcome to Review of Performance. That's right, these series of videos now have a name. My first video on this series was titled Review of Performance, and I think that fits this series as a whole. So, from here on out, that's what these videos will be called. Today, we have 4 cars, 4 tracks, and 4 races to go over. The cars are the 2015 Dodge Viper SRT GT3R, the Group 3 Ford Mustang, the 1999 Pennzoil Nissan Nismo GTR, and the 2016 BMW M6 GT3. The tracks are Deep Forest Raceway, Daytona International Speedway, Laguna Seca, and Road Atlanta. So join me as we go over the history of these cars and tracks, as well as the races themselves. Conceived as a modern take on the Cobra, production began on what would become the Viper in 1989. With the first models released in 1991, the Viper would become one of the most recognizable American sports cars of the modern era. Not only was the Viper recognizable, it was also fast, and it wouldn't be long before it got its debut in racing. Though the Viper got its first taste of racing in 1994, almost winning the 24 Hours of Le Mans in its class, it wasn't until Chrysler partnered with Team Orica, racing the Dodge or Chrysler Viper GTSR, that the Viper would start winning. By 2007, the Viper had won 5 FIA GT titles, 3 class wins at Le Mans, 3 class wins at the 24 Hours of Nürburgring, 2 American Le Mans Series titles, and 1 win at the Daytona 24 Hours, among many others. By the time the GTSR was retired, the car had over 160 wins to its name. But like all things, the downward streak of the Viper must come to an end. While there were attempts to bring the Viper back with the Viper Competition Coupe, it wasn't the same. Then, in 2009, Dodge would announce the end of Viper production in 2010. This, however, wasn't really the end. In 2012, the 2013 SRT Viper was unveiled at that year's New York Auto Show. That same year, it made its racing debut at the 2012 Mid-Ohio Sports Car Challenge, finishing 10th and 12th in their class. They also entered the 2012 American Le Mans Series, finishing 3rd in the GT Class Championship. They then made it to Le Mans in 2013, finishing 8th in their class. And in the 2014 Daytona 24 Hours, they finished 3rd and 6th in class. But by the end of the 2014 season, Chrysler discontinued the factory program, and the Viper itself would be discontinued in 2017, marking the end of the Viper. For now, at least. Switzerland may have only recently lifted their ban on racing back in 2022, but that didn't stop people from making fictional tracks located in the country. Forza did that in Motorsport 4, with the Bernese Alps circuit. And Gran Turismo made their own Switzerland track with Deep Forest Raceway. Originally, the circuit was 3.6 kilometers or 2.23 miles long, but with Gran Turismo 7, the track's new layout runs at 4.25 kilometers or 2.64 miles long. While this track is considered a favorite for players of Gran Turismo, I personally didn't like the track. I was a bigger fan of Trial Mountain or Tokyo Route 246. And from what I've seen at least, some people aren't happy with the new layout of the track, with the new hairpin turn being the worst part of the new layout, and I agree. And I'll be honest, out of the 4 races I'll be talking about over the course of this video, this race was probably the most forgettable. From what I remember from the race, my main rivals for a majority of it were Mercedes AMG SLS and a Ferrari 458. At the beginning of the race, I did my best to maintain the lead, but on the first turn of lap 25, they managed to pass me on the inside. After that, we basically traded first place throughout the race. Outside of that, I can't remember much else outside of winning. Oh, and getting spun out by that damn Suzuki VGT. It's not like the race wasn't fun, but I've had more memorable races in this series, before and after this race. One thing's for sure though, still better than Forza Motorsport. While we might consider the Mustang a muscle car today, it didn't start out that way. When the Mustang was being designed in 1963, the goal was to make a cheap-to-produce car with a price tag of $2,500. In 1964, on the first day it was shown off to the public, Ford had sold 22,000 Mustangs. The next year, Carroll Shelby would modify his own Mustang and send it racing. The GT350 would win the SCCA championship 3 years in a row, showing that even the small pony car could race. In 1967, Ford released the Fastback models, and they're probably the most recognizable muscle cars of its time. Soon, though, the Mustang would have competition from the Camaro, the Challenger, and the Javelin. So, Ford redesigned the Mustang to compete, and in 1971 they released the Mach 1. This would mark the end of the first generation of Mustangs, as economic woes would force Ford to completely abandon V8 Mustangs, shrinking their size and power output for the sake of fuel efficiency. In came the Mustang IIs, a smaller, lighter, and slower Mustang than its previous iterations. While they sold well for their time, they aren't remembered fondly. The 80s would bring about new designs for the Mustang. Dubbed the Fox Body, these Mustangs were small but fast. Today, they're easily customizable, giving owners of Fox Body Mustangs the ability to turn their Mustang into whatever they want, whether that be drag racers, drifters, and many more. And some would even have V8s. The 90s would see some new changes with the release of the 4th generation Mustangs. The first of this generation were slower than the previous gen, but models like the Cobra and the Terminator were faster, equipped with a supercharged V8. 2005 saw the birth of the 5th generation, with Mustangs going back to their origins. These were always my favorite. In 2010, they updated the Mustang with a refreshed look and gave it the 5.0-liter Coyote V8 to replace the old engine. The 6th generation came in 2015, widening and lowering the body. And finally, in 2024, we got the 7th generation. Who knows what's in store for the Mustang in the future? Oh wait. I can't help but bring up the Mustang Mach-E. By technicality, it's a Mustang. And an ugly Mustang at that. If Ford wanted to make an electric SUV, they should have given it a different name, instead of giving it the Mustang nomenclature. When I see a Mach-E, I don't see a Mustang. I see a Mazda CX-5, a Subaru Crosstrek, a Nissan Rogue, a Honda CR-V, a BMW X5, a Ford Escape. When I think of a Mustang, I think loud, fast, low to the ground. I don't think of an SUV. It's one of the worst mistakes modern Ford could have made, and had they named it something else, I wouldn't be so upset about it. Daytona. There's a lot of history in that name, and a lot of drivers have made their names known because of this track. With 65 years of racing, many people have made history winning here. Richard Petty, Jeff Gordon, Dale Earnhardt. And that's just from NASCAR. Hurley Haywood and Scott Pruitt are tied with the most wins at the Rolex 24. A win here means your name on the pedestal with everyone else that put in everything they had to win. The 4-kilometer or 2.5-mile tri-oval was constructed in 1959 for NASCAR, and when it opened, it had become the fastest stock car racetrack until Talladega was built. Then, in 1985, an infield road course was built and would host the Daytona 24 Hours, with a length of 5.73 kilometers or 3.65 miles. I used to think nothing of the track, just another oval course like many others, but now, having raced on it, I can see the appeal. I credit my fascination with NASCAR to Emblem and Slapshoes, whose videos on NASCAR made me genuinely intrigued with the series. Though I'll always prefer the infield road course for having more turns. When it comes to my race at Daytona, I feel like it was the best out of the last 4 races, and probably the best race in this series so far. It's a close one too, since Laguna Seca was really fun as well. Racing a Mustang that I never really liked at first, on a track I never really liked at first, has given me reason to like them now. Plus, the racing was spectacular. From the beginning, watching that Mustang swerve between its opponents, to near the end when a McLaren F1 and I were neck and neck on the first oval banking. I love that kind of racing, and I hope I get more of it as this series continues. And considering this might be the last race I use a controller for, I think that says a lot. Nowadays, I don't think much of Nissan GTRs. Considering there are 7 different versions of the same R35 GTR in Gran Turismo 7 alone, I've become desensitized to seeing the car. But I still remember my favorites, and the Pennzoil GTR GT500 is among the few that I feel are worth racing. After the R32 dominated the racing scene in the early 90s, and the R33, while not as successful, was still kept in the spotlight due to sheer popularity alone, Nissan made the R34 in 1999. Though the R34 GTR never had the winning streak of its R32 predecessor, this specific car, according to my research at least, achieved pole position 4 out of the 7 races it competed in during the 1999 JGTC season. Since then, it's been featured in almost every Gran Turismo game since GT2. I have fond memories of this car and its calsonic twin back in GT3, so getting to race in this car felt like revisiting old memories of playing on the old PS2. God, that makes me feel old. Laguna Seca is probably one of the real-world tracks that I've known the longest, and I credit GT3 for that. Constructed in 1957 as a new track for the SCCA, the track was only 3.1 kilometers or 1.9 miles. Then, in 1988, to meet evolving safety requirements, the track was given a new infield section, and by 1996, the length of the straight between turns 10 and 11 was repositioned to allow for pit lane entrance changes. Today, the track is famous not just in the US, but across the world. Obviously, the most famous section of the track is the corkscrew, a 59-foot drop that, in cockpit view, you take completely blind, and it can be terrifying. With a length of 3.6 kilometers or 2.2 miles, and 11 turns total, it's one of the most memorable tracks in the US alongside Daytona and Indianapolis, and personally, it's one of my favorite US tracks to drive on. Considering this was the first official race that I used my racing wheel on, I was in for a challenge. I only had a week of practice before the race, so I was going into it with only so much skill behind the wheel. I tried racing in manual, but by the time I was 15 minutes into the race, I realized that I wasn't getting the faster lap times I'd hoped for. So I switched to automatic for a majority of the race. I need more practice with downshifting before I can use it in my races. As far as how the race went, this race went about the same way that Interlagos went. My main rival for most of the race was an Aston Martin DBR9. I was tempted to let them win, as it's one of my all-time favorite cars. About an hour into the race, I'd almost lapped it. It never happened until the end of the race, though. Overall, this race was challenging mostly for the fact I was using a racing wheel when I'd never really used one before. That challenge alone made it an exciting race, and I couldn't be happier with the result. In my opinion, BMWs are too common in racing games, especially the M models. I've seen so many of the same car that every time I get one rewarded to me in a racing game, it sits in my garage and is never used because I end up with a dozen of them. And I really do mean the same car. I see little to no difference between model years and between different M models. They'll just mesh into one car that looks the same as the next year. That being said, racing in the M6 felt pretty good. It handled well, sounded amazing, and it was fast. But that's the only amount of praise I'm willing to give it, because nothing can fix the image of the amount of different year BMW M's that sit in my garage in Forza Horizon 5. Road Atlanta held its first race in 1970. And from 1970 to 1993, it held many events from Can-Am, IMSA, and NASCAR. In 1993, the track went into bankruptcy after passing from owner to owner. From 1996 to 1998, the track was bought and remodeled, hosting races from the American Le Mans Series, Champ Car, and Trans Am. Road Atlanta is a track I never really paid much attention to before my race on it. Considering it was featured in Forza Motorsport and seemingly every iteration after, and was only in the newest Gran Turismo as an update, I've only had a few races in Forza Motorsport to form my opinions of the track. Now that I have raced on the track, I can see some of the appeal, especially the straight before turns 10A and 10B, which was basically the fastest part of the track. My main rivals were a change-up from what I was used to. Back in Deep Forest Raceway, my main rival was the Mercedes SLS, and it was the same in this race. But the one that surprised me was the Mazda RX Vision GT, which had all the markings of a contender but never seemed to keep up over time. I did eventually lap the car, but it took almost half the race to do so. Overall, I had a bit of fun with the race, since I was using a racing wheel, but I just feel like something was missing from the race itself. Maybe it was just my feelings for the track at the time. It wasn't as good as Laguna Seca or Daytona, but at least it was better than Deep Forest. So, that was a lot. Thank you for sticking around this long. I know it was a slog to get through. I promise to make the next video shorter. I'm sorry it took so long to get this out there. I've been doing a lot of things behind the scenes and got a bit sidetracked. Not to mention, I got bronchitis just as I was ready to start voice recording. I'm still working on a few other projects and updating the racing series, but I should be back to doing more races soon. If there was anything you feel I missed or anything I got wrong, let me know. I'm always open to feedback and I want to improve on what I've already done so I can make these videos better and better. And be sure to like and subscribe so I know people enjoy this series to begin with. And of course, if you'd like to see these races live, be sure to follow my Twitch so you'll be notified when I go live. Anyways, that'll do it for this video. I hope you all enjoyed, and I'll see you all in the next one.